Here we are.
Hello. You know, doing these panels is a little different when you're not on Zoom because you have to wear pants. But anyway, thank you for joining me today. Let's dive in. So every company is a data company. What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's like a couple different aspects of it. In a sense, like the world has been getting faster and faster and faster, and the way I think of it is, data is the way that we provide sort of like an interface for computers to be able to do things and make decisions about what's happening in the real world. So. Every company has had to become more of a data company because you need data and information in order to know what's going on in your own business, to inform decisions. And then because data is growing more and more important just in the world in general with the sort of burgeoning sort of AI landscape, all of those algorithms need data in order to power what they do. What do you think, Jager?
It's an interesting question. Obviously, Crunchbase is thought of as a data company, but what's interesting is the value, in my opinion, of Crunchbase is not the data that you see on the website. It's all the data that we have behind the scenes on usage data, employee data, sort of the stuff that we track that no one else sees. And I think every company needs to think like that. What is the stuff that we know that no one else knows? And how do we incorporate that into our user experience, our employee experience, our brand experience, all those things? And I think that's how every company is a data company. If you're not thinking like that, you're just like, we build product and we're selling it to customers, and that's it, you're going to miss the boat as personalization and catered experiences for employees become more and more important.
Who do you think is doing a really good job of that right now?
Crunchbase.
Crunchbase. Right.
Yeah. I mean, here at Nylas, we make it easy to access communications data and to connect that to other applications. And so we see a lot of companies that use our data for personalization, especially given that there's been a lot more focus on sort of privacy regulations and things like that. And so if you can add the functionality to an app that sort of makes that experience better and you get explicit permission from the user to do that, then that's a really great way to kind of move forward and to use data with the way that the privacy landscape is evolving.
Right.
Who does a good job is like Spotify. Like, if you think about Spotify, Spotify's a data company, right? They've got all the songs. But is that what makes Spotify great, is all the songs? Like, everyone has all the songs. Apple has all the songs. Tidal has all the songs. All these guys have all the songs. So what makes Spotify great is that they're taking all the users listening to songs, figuring out what you're listening to, compare it to what they're listening to, and figuring out the ones that listen to the music that you listen to, what they listen to that you don't listen to recommend songs back to you. And that personalization is actually the reason I don't unsubscribe from Spotify. I actually like Tidal better, but I love that about Spotify, so I don't unsubscribe. So that is a good example of a data company doing the right thing, and the value is that. It's not the songs. And I think, you all need to think about that for your own companies, because it's so important.
Right. And now Spotify, though, is a huge company, right?
Sure.
I would imagine the approach that smaller businesses, entrepreneurs, startups, the approach that they should take might differ a little from Spotify's. What do you think?
I actually kind of disagree. I think you need to be thinking from inception, ideally, of how are we going to go incorporate the things that we learn about our users into the user experience. So I think a lot of companies are trying to retroactively do it. They're like, I'm ex-Salesforce, so Salesforce tried to retroactively do it. They're like, well, we've got this product and it's this big software thing on top of an empty database. How do we go and incorporate data into that experience now retroactively? And that's actually a really hard thing to do. Had they built Salesforce from the ground up, saying this is going to go and be a custom experience for every salesperson based on whatever experiences that they, like whatever data they provide to us, that would be a better product. So I don't think it takes a big team to do it. It takes a big team to retroactively do it to big companies, though, for sure.
Yeah.
So what are some, go ahead.
The main thing I wanted to add here was that, I think if you're a smaller company, the main thing that really changes is sort of like the how of how you go about incorporating data and thinking about data. Because, if you're small, you don't have a lot of resources. You can't build a lot of stuff yourselves. Mm-hmm. But, the great thing is that there's a ton of tooling out there right now to help you kind of build in that data-driven decision-making from really the ground up when you're building a business, whether that's, using tools to kind of analyze sort of user experiences on a web app, like Woopra or Mixpanel, things like that, to, I think one of the huge growth areas in terms of data right now is sort of, bringing together kind of business intelligence data and kind of forming like a data backbone for just like how you run and operate the business itself. And that can be really simple when you get off the ground, because a smaller company has simpler operations. So I think if you really kind of build that muscle from the ground up, from the very beginning, it just puts you in a much better position to make better decisions later on in the company's life cycle.
Okay, so start from the ground up, think like a big company. When you're a small company, it's never too early to start designing things the way you want them to be, right? What are some pitfalls to avoid? What's a no-fly?
Yeah, I would say that like you also got to keep in mind that data without interpretation is just numbers. You should start with what are the questions that I want to ask first before you kind of just go out and just collect a bunch of data and sort of become a blind number optimization machine. At the end of the day, the humans are in the driver's seat, and I think that like one of the great things about sort of how the tooling landscape has evolved is that it's all about empowering people to make those decisions and to sort of have the information to make the best decision. But you got to start from first principles in terms of like what are the questions that we need to answer, and sort of how do we want to go about doing that, rather than sort of starting from the implementation first.
Maybe dovetailing a little bit off of that, confirmation bias is such a dangerous thing that happens in this world of where you are looking for an answer to the question, you know what it is already, but you just want that validation that you are right. You will absolutely find that validation. So, if you're doing, let's say a company is thinking about their employees and they use Culture Amp, or they ask a bunch of questions to sort of figure out they're doing a good job as an employer, and they're like, this question I don't really like this question. I'm going to modify it because it applies more to our business than a typical business. Like, that's you changing the story so that you get the answer that you want.
Right.
Ask the questions that you don't want to know the answers to, and really analyze and look at the answers that you get, because that's going to give you the feedback that you actually probably need the most.
Right. I'm glad you brought up privacy regulations. European Union's GDPR, in California we have CCPA, there's maybe a new federal privacy law in the United States on the books with bipartisan support. I think we can say these laws are going to continue to shape the way companies leverage data. How, as companies that do leverage data, what are some ways you'd like to see these change, some ways you'd like to see these laws change to just better support business growth while still protecting the consumer?
Yeah, I've got a ton of opinions on this. So Crunchbase, we have a lot of company data, but we also do have a lot of people data. So we have to worry a lot about sort of how do we go and do that in a responsible way. We did that because our users demanded it from us. So we actually resisted doing company or contact data for a very, very long time because of these privacy concerns. So we've gone way out of our way to make sure that we're doing it the right way, we're complying with the law, there's external firms that help you with that, we have our own internal team, and blah, 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 blah. But the reality is I actually hate that we have that data. So there's actually a whole coalition of the ZoomInfos and the Dun & Bradstreets of the world who have formed to fight against any laws that prohibit them from trading and contact data behind people's backs. And we're like the only data provider on the other side of the aisle who's fighting against that, saying, no, get rid of all contact data. That sounds great. Because in that world, we fall back to company data. And that means, and company data is fine to talk about and discuss. So for us, we've built a business model that doesn't depend on this thing that, sure, we can legally do it today, but in the future, if privacy law changes, and I think it will, you need to make sure that you are in a place where you can extract yourself from that data altogether and not have to worry about violating any laws. So that would be some of the defense that I would do.
Yeah.
That's another thing to think about then as you go about building your data architecture is,
right.
Yeah.
What's the exit ramp?
The thing that I think is most concerning about these laws is, having better privacy, nobody could argue against that. Like, we all want to have control over, who has access to our data, how it's used, things like that. But the flip side of that is like, complying with all these regulations is like a huge burden, especially on very small businesses. So, I really hope that regulators sort of think about those kinds of things as thinking about how to kind of evolve these laws over time. It's like, how do we make sure not to really stifle innovation and make it so that only the biggest businesses can really kind of afford to comply and sort of implement all of these regulations. Working with infrastructure providers can really help, but at the end of the day, like, a lot of times if you end up handling the data, it applies to you as well. So I think that's something that like we as sort of like a tech industry need to be really having good conversations with the folks that are writing the laws about to make sure that new companies can keep getting invented, and there's that competition that's really just driving us forward overall.
Okay. One of the challenges, like one of the issues we have with GDPR in particular, is it doesn't let us track things that everyone, I think, actually wants us to track. So in the United States, we track diversity data. We can tell you, like, all the reports you hear about how much, how little, I should say, funding goes to women founders or to underrepresented classes. That data probably came from us because we track that in the United States. Outside of the United States, and particularly in Europe, we're not allowed to. We're told that's illegal to go and track. So we can't shine a light on the inequities that are happening in Europe. And the answer, I'm told, is because there's no racism or gender issues in Europe. I'm going to guess that's wrong. But we don't know because I can't track that data. So that's one of those issues where there's a whole group of people trying to change that particular aspect so that you can track it. And that's how I hope how privacy laws can actually hinder innovation, to your point, where wouldn't it be good for us to know that information so we can change it?
Right. Now, data and the ability to leverage data helped companies like Google and Facebook completely transform our lives, right? Where do you see the next 10 years going in terms of using data to improve lives or just to change the world, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be hard to answer this question without talking a little bit about, AI, ML, that kind of thing. Like, I think the broad trend we're on right now is tools are becoming more and more powerful. There's so many things that we thought that like only humans could do, a decade ago that turned out to be not true at all. And so having, more and more powerful tools for humans to kind of be able to accomplish tasks without having to kind of do all the rote work is a huge trend that I really see accelerating. Another is kind of data integration between different sources. Believe it or not, there's still tons of the world where people still have to context switch between lots of different apps, or there's manual data moving around back and forth. One of the things that Nylas really does and helps accomplish is getting all the data that people need in order to make good decisions into the same place, which it sounds like a simple thing, but it turns out that it saves people a ton of time. And what is technology if not a way to save people time? All the way back from water pumps and things like that. Save people time walking back to the well and forth. The same thing. Same kind of trend is what we're seeing today with. Bringing all the information together so that people can be empowered to use that information in a useful way. Okay.
I totally agree with all that. My view is hyper-personalization is going to be where it's at. When I get on my Tesla, it knows it's me and it changes everything back to the way I had it. That's hyper-personalization, right? I think software needs to do the same thing. As I navigate the internet, I have a certain set of things that matter to me and how I interact with everything that's happening. The software should know that. That goes back to the Spotify example. Help me know, don't make me think, don't make me do anything. Just tell me what I need to know and do the things I need to do for me. That hyper-personalization is... Every single software company needs to be thinking about that, and the ones that figure out how to your point, move it from one thing to another thing, if you can somehow transfer those preferences across, amazing.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that it's very clear that people in general want those personalized experiences, and yet we sort of have this tension with kind of the way that the kind of regulatory environment has been evolving that we really need to reconcile, and I think that we'll see a lot of progress in figuring out what does it look like to both respect privacy, but also deliver people the experiences that they want, because people got a ton of value out of Google, making money off of selling ads, and people really enjoy getting recommendations for things that they actually want in their lives, and we're kind of going through this transformation right now where people are kind of questioning, how do I get that data and how am I allowed to use that data? But people still want those personalized experiences at the end of the day.
So do you think our consumers' attitudes towards privacy will change as they begin to see the value proposition and giving over more of their data?
I think we've kind of been on this pendulum swing a little bit where, there was no rules at all, and, people did whatever they want inside of the tech industry, and people kind of got used to the power of that, but then they saw the downsides and the bad sides of not having transparency into how that data was used. So I see that we've kind of swung back on that pendulum with the introduction of these new legislations, and now that it's been out for a few years, we've been able to see what are some of the negative things that have happened because of these rules, and I really hope that V3 we can kind of reconcile those two pieces and come up with a better solution.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think as sort of to the point around Google, that whole business model of I'm going to sell ads, it's kind of dead. I don't know a lot of businesses that's their that's their pitch is we're going to go and sell ads. So if that's true, that's moving away, then there's a chance that there's technology to help here. Where look, let me have my profile that somehow traverses all these apps, and I understand what their monetization scheme is, and it's not being evil. It's actually going and letting me pay them to have that luxury of having personalization wherever I go. There's a good business there, and that could be. I'm imagining a plaid of personalization or something that just plugs into everything. That's going to exist, and then that might solve some of these problems.
Okay. So, do you think there's a world where advertising could work if it was super directed and incorporated feedback? Instead of it being instead of casting a wide net, right? We use that hyper personalization to. What I'm asking is, do you think targeted advertising is
I think ads are dead. I don't know. I'm bearish on ads.
Okay.
So maybe, but it just doesn't work on me. So maybe I'm an exception. I just think let me pay for the value that I get from things where it's not someone trying to guess the product I need to buy today. I think Amazon will win there.
That's interesting. I don't think ads are dead. Ads are a growth engine for SMBs out there,
True.
and they seem kind of terrible and evil in some ways, but without any sort of advertising, how do you do discovery? How do you, build a business and find people that actually want that product? It's a way of finding people who want to use what you use. So
True.
I don't think they're dead. I think they're just changing.
That's true. Yeah. What is the next generation of ads in a hyper-personalized world? Is it a banner ad? I don't know.
Well, we're going to have to wait and find out, because that is all the time we have for today.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for...
Appreciate it.
Good chatting with y'all.